Okay, so we've talked a little bit about what we've talked about the different species of wheat. Wheat is kind of a weirdo in that, in terms of the domestic crops, where one common name refers to up to 10 specific species. So we talked a little bit about, the various kinds of wheat and sort of the classifications of wheat, where it's grown, the different varieties. But this is one I did want to talk about because there's so much out there right now about gluten. And I thought some of those articles were interesting. A few of you read them, about all the stuff with gluten sensitivity, gluten allergy, gluten intolerance, and how much of it is actually an issue. So to get down to what gluten is the stretchy elastic stuff, and I think you got that from the video pretty well. And it's actually a combination of two proteins. It's two proteins that get stuck together. So there are two proteins contained in wheat, gliadin and glutenin. And when you get wheat wet, those two proteins stick together. They form gluten, and that's what makes flour elastic. Some of the other kinds of flours, like barley and rye flour, that have less gluten in the final flour, I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. I'm assuming that they just have lower levels overall of these two proteins, or they may have lower levels of one, and you sort of end up with a limiting reagent situation. So the gluten protein is a lot longer, it's a lot stretchier. And in your body, when you consume wheat, that gluten gets broken down into those base proteins. There are other grains that contain gluten, but there isn't another grain that has the kind of gluten volume that wheat flour does. Who here has ever baked bread? Okay. I almost feel like we should bake bread. I bake bread a lot. I bake 2 loaves a week, generally. It's all the bread we eat, I bake. And I've been playing around with rye flour. Boy, does that stink. Mine are usually like half whole wheat, half white flour. The whole wheat has little sharp edges. Whole wheat flours don't make a bread loaf that rises as high because the little sharp edges of the bran tend to cut into the gluten strands, and then you miss that elasticity. If you put in half rye flour, you have lower gluten overall, so it tends to make a denser loaf that doesn't rise as big and as fluffy. Don't even get me started on cornbread. Who has made cornbread? Okay. Oh, cornbread's wonderful. Is it the same kind of process as making a wheat bread? Do you knead it? Do you put yeast in it? Nope. It's chemically leavened. It's eggs and baking soda, and those things create little air pockets, but you don't get a gummy, elastic dough because corn lacks gluten. And actually a lot of pasta substitutes. So the common pasta substitutes for people who are avoiding gluten for one reason or another are corn and rice. A lot of stuff gets made with rice. Like I said, I had a cousin by marriage and he had celiac disease. It is a very, very serious, very legitimate reaction to wheat proteins, definitely to gluten and possibly to some other wheat proteins. And it's linked to a risk of early death. He lived a nice, healthy, long life, but he had been avoiding gluten strictly since he was in his 40s. He lived to be 84, I think. And the worst part is he was Italian, from a big Italian family, and at holidays they make pasta. And there would be the big bowl of beautiful al dente pasta, and then there would be Chuck's bowl of really crappy rice pasta. It's very, very sad, because if you've tasted rice pasta, if you haven't tasted rice pasta, don't bother. You're not missing a thing. It's gross. Yes, ma'am? We're going to start on Monday talking about some of the other members of the grass family that are of economic importance. The next one up, you can probably guess. I'm trying to think how we can get samples in here. Corn. I'm still trying to build. Do you have feed corn laying around? Could you bring in just a little bit of feed corn, not broken, just whole? Oh, could we steal one cob? Okay. I'm trying to make my little sample sets, and that would be cool.